get this started. So hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. So this live session is brought to you by Start GMV's AMA series, which is Ask Me Anything. We have about one a month, so be sure to follow us online on both our website or on Facebook to learn more information about when these are happening. So my name is Melissa. I'm one of the board members of Start GMV. I am the operations chair. I also am a full-time lecturer with the Engineering Innovation Institute at UF. But enough about me. Our guest today is Phoebe Cade Miles, and she is the president, I believe, and kind of the brains behind the Cade Innovation and Creativity Museum downtown. And she was telling me about some of the amazing stuff they've been doing with education in the midst of COVID. So before we get started though, I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors who help make all of the programming for Start GMV possible. And that is Interactive Resources, Opie, Hutchinson, 352, Infotech Feather, Santa Fe College. So please, we love having our sponsors and we love all of their attention. If you did in fact happen to make a donation to the Josh Greenberg, any donations for these events, go to the Josh Greenberg Onward and Upward grant, which we give to startups in the town to help them get going. So any of that money goes straight to that fund. So how we're gonna run this is you can type any of your questions into the chat box and I will read them out loud, or if Phoebe herself sees them, we can get them going and addressed. We will be sure to speak them out loud to make sure the questions can be heard. But with that, let's get started. So Phoebe, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, your background, what led you to this idea of this museum, and some of the really cool stuff you guys have been doing there.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me, first of all, and welcome everybody. My name is Phoebe. I'm the youngest of 6 children that I grew up in Gainesville. My father was recruited to the University of Florida in 1960 to open the Division of Renal Medicine at the hospital, at the medical school. And the medical school then was brand new. It was the first medical school in the state of Florida, which is shocking that it was so undeveloped back in the 60s. So I was actually born at Alachua General Hospital, which is the site of the Innovation Hub right now. So I'd like to tell people that innovation was just in my destiny. So I grew up in Gainesville, went to Buchholz. I graduated from Buchholz. I met my husband. He's actually there, not on, his name is Richard. He's the co-founder with me. We met, gosh, in 9th or 10th grade. He was in 9th grade, I was in 10th grade. We both went to college, University of Washington, because we wanted to go as far away from Gainesville as possible. As much as I liked growing up in a college town, I could not wait to get out of Gainesville. And we both thought we were never, ever coming back except to visit family. So it's kind of ironic that so much of our time is spent in Gainesville now. We live in Washington, DC. My husband is a former diplomat from the diplomatic corps. We spent most of our young adult life overseas at overseas missions. Germany twice, once with the military, once with the State Department, Barbados, Buenos Aires and Argentina. And then we would always come back to Washington. So we bought a house here. We raised 3 kids overseas, many different school systems, 3 very different children. We have 1 grandchild. So that's kind of the personal background. We both fly to Gainesville once a month, more or less, to work on the museum. And we started it on our kitchen table in Argentina. Did that answer your question, Melissa?
Yes, but I'd like to know how it started from a kitchen table in Argentina to what it is today.
Correct. It has been difficult. People think we actually live in Gainesville and we do not. Well, we were assigned, my husband was assigned to the embassy in Buenos Aires. My father had wanted to do a museum for years, had talked about it, and we were always saying, Dad, if you want to do a museum, we will help you do that. We'll make sure we'll do our best to make it a success. But he hemmed and hawed, he didn't do it until I think the week we were moving to Argentina. He called in Washington and said, I've decided I want to do it. Will you help? And it's like, we're moving to the ends of the earth. I mean, yes, but I wish you had asked 5 years before when we had this much time to work on it. So we quickly met with lawyers here in Washington, D.C., set the ball in motion to get our 501c3. It started as a private foundation. It's now a public foundation, but we did all of the work from Argentina for the first 2 years. I would fly back, not that often, but I did a lot by telephone and by email. Then when we moved back to Washington, I was there once a month. For 2 years, we actually did move down 2012 to 14 or 2011 to, I can't remember, 2 years to really get it kickstarted, hire staff and so forth.
Well, awesome. So what was the original vision? What is the goal of the museum? And what is the overall vision for you for creativity and innovation in Gainesville? What would you like to see? And how are you helping translate that education to the kids right now, like you were telling me before the call started?
Right. Well, so our vision is to spread an inventive mindset across the globe. So we actually think of ourselves as an R&D lab that's located in Gainesville with an international mission. Gainesville is a fine place to test out all of these different concepts because it's small enough, but it's also we have a major research university. We have close relationships with the school board, with the school system, with all of the other nonprofits that deal with kids. So we're able to test out these different approaches. And then what is successful, we can export. So that's the vision, is really to be an international force for creative education. Basically, kids today are needing to be educated for a future that we can't really even envision today. And the traditional educational model is not really sufficient because it's very, it's set on acquisition of knowledge and test taking, which is very different than problem solving and imagining different scenarios and being having what we call an inventive mindset. So an inventive mindset is thinking like an inventor. It's being motivated by problems to solve them. It's learning how to put seemingly very different concepts together in a unique way. That's what inventors do. It's not new information. It's putting it together in a new way.
It's the associations they're able to make between them.
Correct. But that's not really taught in school systems so much. They don't have time. Many teachers don't feel prepared to do that. So we come alongside and teach everything through the lens of invention. We find you can teach almost any subject through invention. You can teach history, you can teach science, definitely science, you can teach design. So it's basically STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, all come into one invention. So you tease it apart, and then you can teach concepts that are relevant, exciting, kids can understand why it's important.
So we have some questions in the chat box. So Lauren asked, is there anything that's been tested at the Cade that has been used elsewhere? Process, projects, any of that?
So yeah, this is what I was telling you just a little bit, Melissa, about over COVID, that it actually turned out to be a great benefit to us. I feel bad saying that sometimes because for us, it presented an opportunity that we took advantage of. We had to close down completely for 2.5, 3 months, but we didn't let any of our staff go. We did get a PPP grant, but we decided to pivot the entire team to support the educational team in creating online and digital content. So we got advice, we bought state-of-the-art recording equipment, trained up our staff, started doing what we were doing in the laboratories, but videotaping it for the purpose of, well, we actually had it recorded by PBS, our local TV station, and then they beamed it into a lot of the housing and urban development projects that don't have Wi-Fi. If any of you have been following the news in Gainesville, or indeed in the nation, many at-risk children do not have access to Wi-Fi. So doing a digital virtual classroom is very, very difficult. So we decided to work with PBS because they do have TVs, they do have public TV stations. We recorded segments that were then shown in their living rooms. We created science packs that we sent into the housing and urban development projects that matched the PBS segments so that they could actually continue to do some of the science experiments we had been working with them on at the museum. In the course of doing this, and this is answering your question, Lauren, we were discovered by Qualcomm, the international company, and they were looking for a virtual take your child to work day. And they really liked our whole approach of teaching science through inventions. And they hired us to do that. So we actually created in August, they had the International Take Your Child to Work Day, and over 3,000 participants across the world at all of their global affiliates. So that was one. Through our videos, we were also discovered by the Florida House, which is in Washington, DC, and they hired us to create an exhibit on Florida innovation, the history of Florida innovation. Yeah, so those are two examples that we're super excited about.
Those are great. So Terry actually wanted to know basically what are the opportunities for people to volunteer with your organization? And I'm pretty sure I want to share the same information with my students. So how could, engineering students that you have, or people in the community who want to give back and have, a lot of people with inventors and innovators mind, but also they may not be the best at communicating. So how can we, give back, and how can we help you with your vision?
Yeah, so pre-COVID, we had a fantastic volunteer program with volunteer training. We worked with a lot of women in engineering, women in electrical engineering, WESE, I think that was what it was called. They will come in, and sometimes if they have an idea, they'll create it themselves and come into our fabrication labs and teach a class on that, or they'll come and just volunteer for the projects that we're doing on a weekend anyway. So basically our concept, Terry, is that we teach science through invention. We teach critical thinking through invention. Inventors are at the center of everything we do. So we change the invention topic every 2 months. And that means that topic is threaded through every experience at the museum, in every room. So anytime you come, you'll have a different experience because we'll be looking at a different set of inventions. So if the topic is, say, DNA, we'll be looking at inventions that and discoveries that are using DNA, like CRISPR technology. We do a little segment on that for kids, extracting DNA from strawberries. So in that case, we have students come in helping with those particular segments. But if then we switch to musical innovations and wave technology of speakers and microphones, we might have music students come in and help. So really it's they're general volunteers that help with everything. And then there are specific volunteers that are teaching a specific concept that we happen to be focusing on. Terry, did that answer your question? I am remote.
She wants to know, I think, how can people who are remote right now help during the area of COVID? How can they help in this remote setting to help with those? Do you guys have any volunteer opportunities right now remotely?
That are remote. I would have to think about that, but because I'm not running operations anymore. This has been the greatest blessing of this period. We have 30 employees now, and we have a crackerjack team that are running all the day-to-day operations. We only come down once a month. So I'm not sure how they're doing remote volunteers right now. I'm certain that there are certain ways that it could be done, but I do not know. I would have to check in with them.
Yeah, because Terry just showed her video. So you can feel free to unmute yourself and actually ask in person. There are enough people to make it more informal here. So you can
it kind of depends. I mean, we actually do work with a lot of people that are remote now, but they're working on specific projects. So it kind of depends on what what your area of interest is, if there's a particular area that you like to work in.
Communications. Part of my background when I worked as an Army civilian, I really enjoyed telling the soldier stories. And so by that same token, what I've learned in working in technology for the last 5 years is engineers are often extremely brilliant and often not the best at communicating even their own ideas or concepts. It's almost a translation that has to happen. And so I was wondering if there was an opportunity, for example, if there is someone that's affiliated with your organization or the museum that's maybe applying for a grant, or maybe they are trying to get an article published, if they needed some support in just telling their story, that's something that I would love to do on a volunteer basis.
You know what, Terry, I would love to introduce you to our marketing person. Her name is Sue Dratty, and she has a whole communication strategy.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that.
So she would be the person for you to talk to. And I'm sure she would be delighted to have you help in getting the story out in different ways, different opportunities. Yeah. We also have a Radio Cade podcast where we interview inventors. And my husband, he's on the screen, Richard, can you share your screen so they can see? He's the one that does most of the interviews. He's the co-founder with me as well. And we're always looking for ways to expand the listenership. It's such a crowded market right now with podcast, but it's steadily growing, and the topics are fantastic.
I was stationed in Stuttgart as an Army civilian for 6 years. And while I was over there, I was actually, our garrison there at Kelly Barracks actually had a radio program on American Forces Network. So that kind of stuff is near and dear to my heart. So I definitely love some contact information just to share my contacts. If I could be of support, I would love to.
Yeah, that would be great. So Terry, we lived in Nuremberg for 4 years and we lived in Berlin for 3. Yeah.
Okay.
We were on, not Merrill Barracks, it was called Merrill Barracks then, it's closed now, but we lived off, we didn't live on base. We lived in
on the economy, yep.
Yeah. But I think we did have some training. Richard had training in Stuttgart, so we've been there a couple times. Yeah, I loved living in Germany.
Thank you.
Remember, anyone can type any questions in the box. I'm curious with respect to, these kind of education initiatives, how do you guys pick your topics and how do you find the information to go out there? Do you have like a team of inventors or a team of like people who help, and how do you engage with not just through PBS, when in person, how do you engage with these lower income communities to help with like that education gap?
Well, that's a lot of questions. So which one do you want to do
Oh, you pick.
So how we choose the topics, in the beginning, it was just Richard and I would choose an invention topic. Now, remember, I grew up with an inventorous father. So for you that don't know, my dad was the inventor he led the team that invented Gatorade at the University of Florida. So he was an inventor my entire childhood. He was always coming home with interesting things and having us try him out and discussing his different inventions. So we always thought it would be nice to give all kids access to an inventor. So that's why we reach out so much to kids to let them meet in person inventors. So how we choose we created a proprietary framework called Invent Possible Framework. And it's probably too complicated to go into right now, but I will give you an analogy. If you think of the building blocks of language, there are only 26 letters in our alphabet, but you can create millions of combinations. It's infinite, right? So we boiled down inventions to what we call 32 building blocks of invention that are then, that could be combined in any way to create an infinite number of inventions. So one particular, and then there are 7 pillars of science. So each pillar has building blocks. And one example again is wave technology. So waves is one of the pillars. You can have mechanical waves, you can have electromagnetic waves, but basically the building blocks would be acoustics, optics, and diagnostics. You can use waves in any invention that uses wave technology as its core would be, it would be placed there. So we look at our framework and we think, we really want to do some things with waves. So this time we're going to do musical waves. And we're going to combine it with electrical guitars. And so you bring in a whole nother type of technologies of magnetic coils and resonance and electromagnetic waves and mechanical waves. So then we'll have for 2 months this theme. And then we just look for inventors in the community that represent that field. And then they come in every weekend, and anybody can go up and talk to an inventor and ask them about their invention. We do a lot just based on who we meet. So say we meet one of our Cade Prize winners. We run a Cade Prize, and the winner one year created a sustainable toilet for off the grid, and we wanted to feature it. So we did a whole series on off the grid energy sources. That was, so it really just kind of depends. Now we finally have a council for the arts and sciences that we bring in the Council for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, where we meet and discuss what new topics could be and who they think they could bring in. And then we build it out from that. And then we do it a year in advance now. So like, we're gonna be doing a Tesla versus Edison showdown. We're doing space now as a theme that's gonna be coming off of it's going into music. Then the Tesla, we did insects before, insect-inspired inventions, where we could work with IFAS, bring in a lot of their entomologists. So it's fun. We do a brainstorming session and we choose 6 themes for the year. Then we start filling it in with which inventors are coming.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds great. And then I had a question and my brain is like everywhere right now because you have every trigger in my brain going crazy. What would you have? So I teach engineering at UF, and one of the biggest things I have is I have students who are scared to talk to inventors, students who are scared to approach people. It's like this huge barrier with networking. What recommendations do you have for people to overcome that? And how do you network with somebody who they see as like that person, that inventor, that person who they want to meet, and those kind of things?
Right. Well, that was one reason that we insisted on having inventors at the center and bringing them in once a week. Now, during the COVID time, we have not done that. We are open again, but with limited visitors. We do socially distancing tours. We figured out how they can do their science experiments just as they had done before, but with individual little packets that they pick up. And then it's time tours where they're spaced out. So we have not brought in the inventors now because it wouldn't be worth their time as much. We just don't have the volume. But that was one reason we did it, because they are there to meet students. And that's their favorite part. Like they want the students to come up and say, hey, what are you doing?
I've learned that with my students at work is that is their favorite part, is interviewing them, but the students are just so scared. They are so scared for that networking, that's that person. And overcoming that fear is so hard for people.
Mm-hmm.
You did state a lot that you were doing a lot of the stuff with PBS and trying to help with educational, disparity. What other kinds of things have you been doing to help with, the different economic gaps and reaching different kinds of people to spread, the love of science?
When we first started, there was a small endowment that wasn't enough to build the building we have now. We raised $15 million from the public. So now we're a public foundation. But at the time, we had enough to hire maybe a staff of 5 and rent a small building. It was not enough to ever build what we needed to do. But we thought, well, we can start programs even then, but without a build. We started in 2011, I believe, running programs. We hired our first educator. And we couldn't, like many startups, you can't get the word out, and no one wanted to come to that section of town. It was a very perceived as dangerous part of town. It wasn't developed. It was a EPA Superfund site where Depot Park is now. And we would try to attract people, but they wouldn't come. So we thought, okay, we're just going to offer these on scholarship to kids from the Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, Pace Center for Girls, different groups that we reached out to other nonprofits that were providing services to kids. And that's what we started with. Some of the charter schools that wanted science enrichment but couldn't afford it. They had more flexibility than the public schools at that time. So we would work with charter schools. They would bring their kids in, they would spend a day doing, and they loved it. So that's when we started developing all of our invention curriculum. Then over time, the reputation built slowly over time. It just takes time. I think a lot of people give up too soon. So we now have a partnership with the Letcher County School System, where they identified, we're part of their equity and education program. We're the only nonprofit in the town that's part of the equity and education program. So they chose 3 of the worst performing elementary schools. We started with just second grade. Second graders would come in once a week, although each second grader specifically came once a month, but every week we would have a second grade class. And it was a science intervention. They were there for 4 hours. We worked with the public library, some tech startups, the program that we did, and it was all coordinated to tell the same story, the same experience. We would match it with what they were supposed to be learning in science, but also match it to say, if we were talking about the 3 states of matter or the 4 states of matter, like plasma, the book would be about a snowman with 3 states, right? So neurologically, the more overlaps you have in the networks, the more likely you are to retain. It was so popular, and the kids, we did soft metrics that year. When they started whether they thought they were good at science, did they like science? And the answer was no to both. And at the end, they all love science, and some of them want to be scientists. So that was hugely encouraging. So the superintendent asked if we could add on 4th grade, it's 3rd grade. So this last year we were doing 2nd and 3rd grade. This year we're adding on 4th grade. So we're moving with the 2nd graders through 5th grade. So it's quite a mammoth project, and it's quite a number of students coming through. So this year now we're going to them. We have our own van, and every week we'll be going to their classrooms, bringing the same experiences. Now we're part of we got our IRB approval to do a long-term study to look at their test scores in 3rd grade and in 5th grade.
Wow.
No, it's huge. Yeah, we're excited.
That sounds amazing. I worked in elementary schools in undergrad, and I love any kind of education that sparks those creative minds. So Terry asked, what do you find most rewarding in your work to realize the dream of the museum?
What do I find most rewarding? I think, there's just this, it's a hard question to answer, but I think when I look back on the experience, what I love about invention and creativity and entrepreneurship is truly cuts across all social backgrounds, political parties, philosophies. It's something that is truly, it's what it means to be human, this creative spark and this ability to problem solve. It's just many people don't see themselves that way. And I love when that light bulb comes on, but I've loved working with people from different backgrounds and all having this common goal, because across the nation now, everyone's saying people don't work together anymore. And they're always, and that is maybe true on a national level, but on a local level, we worked with, 4 different rounds of city and county commissioners, different mayors, different political parties, environmentalists, businessmen, that, on a national political level, they would probably hate each other. But we were able to have a common vision that was positive based on this positive message. And we've worked really hard to keep it that way, not very focused on what we have in common. And that's creativity and this desire to, creativity is the first, imagination and creativity, but then the whole inventive mindset you can have even if you're not an inventor.
Yes, you can. I still have to teach my engineering students that every semester.
Mm-hmm.
They do not think it is something that can be learned or can be adapted and that they can have. They think you either have it or you don't.
And that's so untrue. And that's what I love, like pushing back against that and having, you know, one of our dreams is to work more closely with the parents of the kids that are at risk. And so far we have, we give each family a free membership. And at first it's been very difficult. We didn't see a lot of them taking advantage of it, but we have the Housing Urban Development in Gainesville, the executive director is on our board, and she's working with the shit. It just takes time for people to feel like this place is for them. And not only is it for them, that you want them there and that they're a part of this innovation community. So we started by offering like Head Start had their Christmas party there. Pace Center for Girls had their graduation there. And we give our rentals are $3,000 to $4,000 a night, but not on Monday or Tuesday. We hold several nights for free for our partners, our educational partners. So that's been really, we're starting to see some of the families actually coming back with their kids on a weekend just to walk around. And that's really been, that's hugely exciting.
I guess from me seeing this, so, well, there's a question here. How was the experience of creating the new building? He took his kids when they were in elementary school to middle school to the old building and its programs, and it had the feel of intimacy, even Dr. Cade's death. So what was it like to build this bigger new building?
So who asked that question?
Roger.
Roger. Have you been to the new building?
Roger, you are free to unmute yourself and join on in. Yes, he has been to the new building.
Okay. Well, so we tried to keep that by creating the creativity and the Fab Lab as small rooms, that when you go in, it's still a small experience. It is different than across the street, but we actually are still using across the street for field trips and summer camps. We ran summer camps this summer, socially distanced. They were sold out. No infections that we know of. None of our staff, none of the kids, but we took protocols. So there are still lots of opportunities to have that kind of like, let's explore this together. And now we have, because of COVID, we have timed creativity lab experiences. And we have found it actually works out even better because it's much more like what Roger was describing the classes before. A set class comes in and experiences something. Where before, when we first opened the big building, it was just walk through and go through at your own pace, but it was hard to get that shared sense of excitement. So we're actually gonna keep that now, the timed experiences. And they're like 40-minute classes, 30 to 40 minute.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, so I have some questions. You were talking about you were trying to target parents and stuff. What kind of programming have you done besides, getting the parents in there with the housing and the free things? Do you create any of your inventions or experiments to be like parent in need, to where it can, be that bonding experience for kids to kind of interact with their families?
Yes, I mean, what we find is that the building blocks, the experiments that we have tied to many of the building blocks of invention are fun for any age, right? They're just fun. But how you describe it changes according to the age level.
Mm-hmm.
So you could build like a straw bridge challenge in engineering. It's fun to do for a whole family. But how you talk about dynamic tension and different things, like dynamic loads, and it just depends on what the age group is. And that's what our educators have to address in that way. But it is designed to be family friendly for all ages. We have had some for adults only programming, like the science of beer making and microorganisms. I think we did pickle making about the role of sodium in preservation, and we've done jewelry making where you do soldering, learning how to solder for grown-ups. We have lecture series of ethics in science, which we think is very important. There's not a lot of talk in that space. So we're doing one in November of the ethics of of gene editing. So we'll talk first about what is it? What is CRISPR technology? And then we'll do a survey, you know, like, most people would be fine with gene editing for cystic fibrosis. But like, how many people would be fine for gene editing blue eyes instead of brown? Or like, where on that scale would people be comfortable with what gene editing is? So it's interactive, it's a discussion, but definitely pitched more to adults.
Interesting. Well, anyone else, feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions. We don't just have to use the chat box. We kind of have a small intimate group here. So otherwise I can just keep going because my brain will always have a million questions. So I'd love to hear, I was about to say, Virginia, I'd love to hear anything you have with being the Black Professional Society group and getting things going.
Hey, Phoebe. Well, first I'll start by saying thank you. You guys have been extremely supportive of Gainesville Black professionals from the very, very beginning. And I love the relationship that we have and that we're sharing and developing. I remember in the beginning when I took a tour while you all were still building, we all wrote messages on the wall, on the, you know, the
Right.
steel and everything. And I remember you all saying that we were doing that because you just really wanted the community in there. And I know when I'm in there, I feel warm, but I'm just wondering, Phoebe, do you feel like all those people are there? Do you feel the energy when you go to the Cade nowadays?
I actually do. It's my favorite building in the world. And people who haven't been there before come in and go, oh my gosh, I feel so at peace. And they don't know why. I mean, it's just, well, there's a mathematical reason why, but yeah. I think it's also that this was not a single endeavor. So what did you write, Virginia? Do you remember?
Oh my God, I do not remember now. I have a picture of it because I wanted to make sure I always remembered. But right now I cannot remember off the top of my head. Yeah.
A lot of people wrote biblical verses that were their favorite one, that were very uplifting. And so they're all hidden behind the wall everywhere. But people wrote they wrote whatever they wanted to. That was uplifting. It had to be like positive.
Yeah, I think it had something to do with the place where I was at that time. So it was definitely motivational and encouraging to myself. I just do not remember exactly what it was, but I do. I mean, like, my hat's off to you. I know it was a journey getting it there. And I know I've talked to you about all the reasons why you all chose that location. And so I just love the fact that the Cade is there. So.
Well, thank you, Virginia. Yeah, I mean, thank you for the kind words. I do feel that way. And then as far as the beauty of the play, I don't know how many of you have heard of I talk about it all the time, so if you've heard about it and you don't want to hear about this again, but it's the Fibonacci sequence and the golden mean. So the whole building is based on this mathematical sequence called the Fibonacci sequence. And basically it's when you add numbers together, like 1 plus 1, if you start with 1 is 2, then you add 2 plus the preceding number, 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8, plus 5 is 13, and it goes to 21, 34, 55, it goes on into infinity. Once you get past 34 and 55, if you divide the numbers by each other, you get 1.618 every time. That's called the golden mean. And that was well known in the Renaissance. It's actually an ancient proportion that is ever repeating. So everybody knows about pi, right? The irrational number pi. But that pi was always known to be utilitarian. It's for measuring circles and and spaces. That's what pi is. But phi is 1.618. It was much more associated with beauty, but it was equally important. You had pi and phi both together. So we looked at ancient structures that were beautiful that follow this golden mean. Temples, a lot of cathedrals, a lot of Renaissance artists, the proportions in the painting follow the golden mean. So we thought, how do we take this ancient principle of beauty and create a modern twist? Because I believe that all inventions are founded on what came before. Every generation builds on the generations before, And future generations are going to build on what legacy we leave. So we have to be careful about what legacy we leave. So I wanted something that was built on that ancient principle of beauty and proportion. So we chose the nautilus shell, which builds its chambers on the golden mean. So it's rather than a rectangle, the rectangles, if you connect the corners, it creates a Fibonacci spiral. So think of a nautilus shell as a Fibonacci spiral. So the building is on a spiral. It's on a Fibonacci spiral. The architects made the stairwell 8 feet wide, the oculus 13 feet wide, the second floor, that 55 feet high, 34, 20, it's all in this proportion. So when you walk in, it feels beautiful because it is beautiful. And the human body has multiple golden means in it. So the face alone has 21 golden mean proportions.
Wow.
That's incredible, right? And so Leonardo's picture of the man is showing that divine proportion. He called it the divine proportion. And again, it's beautiful because it's in nature. So it is a beautiful building. And then, so one of you was asking what is our goal for the future? The spiral starts in the very center of the oculus, and it spirals out on a Fibonacci spiral, goes out of the building into the park. And if you've noticed the statues in the park, Josh Greenberg, actually, we donated a statue to him. It's with his profile. They're either a vase or a face. So those are on the spiral. We had a GIS company map the Fibonacci spiral from our center across the globe. And that's, at first we were disappointed because we thought it would be cool if it went through London and Paris and Madrid, like really cool cities. The only large cities that it goes through are in our tech corridor: Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa, and Atlanta. So think of Atlanta being the top of the nautilus. Then it goes through some of the poorest regions in the world that don't have an innovation economy. So our goal is to take our concepts of how we've been working with people that haven't had access to the innovation economy. And if it works for us in Gainesville, we can share it with parts of Cuba, parts of Haiti, parts of Guatemala, going all the way up Mexico, Indian reservations, the outback of Australia, some of the poor parts of Africa and Patagonia. If you picture the spiral going around the globe.
Wow. That seems like a very lofty mission, and it sounds so cool though. I actually kind of like that it doesn't hit any of the big cities, because I think that leads to a much better mission of spreading innovation, spreading that beauty throughout the world.
And just the sense of agency, that people have, it's innate to humans. They just have to understand that and have access to the tools that will help them do that.
So what is your vision to getting them access to those tools? What would your advice be, to kids who don't think they have it anymore, or to, college kids who think they lost it? Because personally, sometimes I think the education system beats that mindset out of them the way it currently is. So.
Yeah, that's a good question. Are you talking about like a different country, like what we would do in a different city?
I'm even in the US, how do you keep spreading it? Because I feel like so much is being taught to the test. We're not focusing as much on this inventiveness and this creativity aspect. And how do you encourage students, and what advice do you have for, not just kindergartners or elementary schools, but college students, even young adults? How can they keep nurturing this ability?
Mm-hmm. So again, almost every inventor I talk to, we always ask them, what were your early influences? I can't think of anybody that just became an inventor on their own. They either, had an uncle that bought them a microscope, or there was a science teacher that they really took a liking to, or in my case, I had an inventor as a father. It's just people usually they're exposed to this way of thinking and they just develop it. So you have to actually go to them, I think. So we got a grant for Cade on the Go, or Cade on the Road. And it's, it looks like a huge horse trailer, but it's not. It's actually a traveling classroom that it unfolds, kind of like, think of a big Winnebago that has things that pop out. So we just got it this summer. We got it delivered this summer. So we this next year, we'll be taking it out to our outlying communities. We have some of the very poorest pockets of poverty in the nation in North Central Florida, in the surrounding counties, even in Gainesville. It's quite disturbing. But we can go out to Levy County, to Clay County, to some of those outlying districts and bring our Cade on the Go to them. And then with our digital that we've developed, we don't have this in place now. We would like to do just what we're doing, digital classrooms, where we give them a project and we can check back in on them online. Like, how are you doing? Let's see your little project. So we're having a conversation with one of our Cade Prize winners. We run a Cade Prize every year for the best Florida innovation. This year, it's actually, we're including Georgia and Alabama in the research universities. So I can't remember what I was going to say about that. We were talking about Cade Prize. Oh yes, we have a call with one of our Cade Prize finalists who wants to run an invention convention online with school districts outside of Gainesville, and work with kids to like develop their own invention. And then we'll do this like Shark Tank pitch online. We're not ready to do that now, but that is what we would like to do.
Oh my gosh, definitely keep me in the loop for that, because I absolutely love that idea and that is so much fun. And I miss working with children. College students sometimes act like it, but they don't really count. So any other questions from the audience? I see we have Patrick joining, Terry, Lauren, Nicholas, any of you guys, any additional questions for Phoebe before we let her go? Terry unmuted, you got a question?
No, I just wanted to thank Phoebe for giving very generously of her time, and just getting to understand some of the behind the curtain thought behind the design of the museum. As you were explaining it, I was looking at the plan of it, and it's just even the parking islands, the way they're constructed, it's just the way the parking spaces go, because I work in transportation infrastructure. I'm like, that is a non-standard parking layout. And then I saw it, I understood what it was doing, and that was really awesome.
So did you notice that this is what I actually had to, the city insisted we put parking in, which is okay. We wanted to use that as a grass field, but I thought, okay, we'll put a parking lot in, but I have to make it fit the spiral.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll redesign it. But like we had, the island is, it's a 21 degree coming out from the oculus, which means when you have the island there, you have 3, 5, and 8 parking lot.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's so it all fits on the Fibonacci right there in the island. But we haven't created the exhibit for that yet, just because we haven't had the bandwidth and haven't had the time. But we will be educating people more about that whole 21 degree angle coming out, and it's on a like a little bit of a spiral.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You see it and you understand it. It resonates in you because it's beautiful to look at. And then what you've explained was the science behind it, and I'm like, well, of course, how could I have missed that? Yeah. So it was just really interesting to hear you explain how even in the design of the museum itself, you incorporated that inventor spirit.
Well, the one thing I would say is it's really good is that we did not have the money to do this building at the beginning. And people, people hear Gatorade and they think, oh, they're set. Well, it wasn't that way. Again, my dad set up an endowment, and it's great, but it is not sufficient to do what we did. But because of that, and it was really hard to get supporters early on because it seemed outlandish or crazy, or like we're going to build a central park and a toxic waste dump and it's going to be great. I mean, no one really believed it was going to happen. But because of that, we had a lot more time to develop things the right way. Mm-hmm. Not by choice. We would have wanted to open like right away, but if we had, say we had gotten this magical, huge donor that we thought we would get, I think it would have been a disaster. I'm so much happier that it grew organically over time with input from hundreds of people. And we were able to take the time to do it right. Not because I didn't have all of the right ideas in my head. I can promise you that.
I think that's an important message to send out to people, is that so often I think people quit too early, and that it's important to wait things out and let things happen the way they should. And, you know, don't just rush something to get out in the world just to get it out, but to take your time and make sure it's being done right.
Yeah. It's the unfolding. It's seeing the unfolding of it and allowing yourself to be open to what the universe gives you. That's kind of woo-woo. I know that's out there, but
no, but Terry, I thought that from the very beginning. That's
the goal of my 5th decade, is to just be a part of things as they unfold and then see where I fit into it. So everything you've said today really resonates. I see Virginia, she's like, yes.
No, that's 100%.
You said.
And it will be better, because this is the thing, is that invention happens with a true diversity of just ideas and different thoughts and different people and different backgrounds. And that is really key to creativity and invention. It's not ever monolithic, and it can't be. And so that means any one person can put a vision out there, but it's very unlikely that that vision is going to be full blown. They're going to need other people to come alongside and refine and push back. And luckily we didn't have the money to do the original vision, and I'm pretty glad.
I wanted to ask though, Phoebe, you and Stephanie both have such a way of creating partnerships. Where did you get that from? Because I don't think that is something that's innate in all of us, but the two of you really seem like you all make a special effort to make sure you're connecting with as many people in the community as possible.
Well, that's one of our metrics for success of is true partnerships and collaborations. And where I got that from is actually University of Virginia Center for the Advanced Study of Culture. I actually sit on that board now as well. And they have been doing research for years about what really makes a city thrive. And it's not the usual metrics that are thrown out there. It's what they call dense overlapping networks of people. So it's not, just a great school system. The school system, the kids that are in the school also have to have access to great cultural offerings, a strong church life, or whatever it is, something that feeds that part of who they are. So none of us can do it alone. It's a network of, and they call it the Thriving Cities Initiative. And they have the 3 classical endowments: the true, the good, the beautiful, then the just, the economic, and I can't remember what the last one is, but it's, when you're looking at, does a city really thrive, you have to look at every aspect of the population. And if there's one part that's really missing, that city is not thriving. I don't care what, like if Gainesville says it's like the #1 city voted because we have more parks, it's like, well, what are the networks underneath that? And that the statistics most people use can hide dysfunction. So it was very deliberate. We are using their research. And from the beginning, again, we set out partnerships with Boys and Girls Club, Pace Center for Girls, and that's kind of how we built outward, like the Fibonacci novelist.
Well, I think you guys did a great job of doing that.
Thank you.
Like, you're not just the Cade, like I hear about you all throughout the community in different aspects. And I don't think you always hear about different entities. Like you may hear about this entity over in this circle. You may hear about this entity over in this circle, but you guys really have, like you said, just network and created relationships with various networks. And I think that's important.
Well, thank you. Because we believe every person has this creative ability, but they won't know unless we interact with them. And then they can come to the table and help create new ideas and new experiences.
I'm an example of that spiral, Phoebe, because I live in Alabama. I started work at Infotech
Right.
2 weeks ago, and one of my onboardings was listening to the Radio Cade episode where Richard interviews Mr. Rothrock and Mr. Cade.
Yeah.
So that got me interested, and then I saw this opportunity to attend your Ask Me Anything. So it's just those weird serendipitous things that overlap that bring people together. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. So will you be moving to Florida, or you stay in Alabama?
Right now we're all working remote, and my position will eventually, maybe someday, require more travel. So we're open to it, but right now we're here with my husband's job. He retired from the Army here, and we've been near Fort Rucker, Alabama since
We know Fort Rucker. Richard was a helicopter pilot.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, he was. Yes, ma'am, he was.
So, Melissa, this is the end, right? You said 1 hour?
Quick question.
Okay.
Oh, Patrick, shoot.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having us. Appreciate your time. I guess I was thinking about like a Gainesville hackerspace compared to the Cade. I remember the Cade. The Cade's beautiful, and obviously you have your lab rooms and things. Then you go to a hackerspace, and it's just crap everywhere, and stuff piling on, and sometimes invention's not very neat, and it's kind of how to get people to think about this can be messy, and a messy process. So it's almost like if you had a warehouse across the street just full of crap and people could just play around with circuits and make a mess would make sense too.
Yeah, we definitely are talking about that.
Making a mess.
Yeah, well, we need a space for that. So again, the organic growth that don't over exceed what we can do, because we had to figure out how to run operations for the general public first, and then we had to figure out how to do these partnerships during the school week. Now that's where I wanted to add on like teen tech nights. And that might be one of the aspects where they just get to take things apart and put them back and messy, but it may not be in the Fab Lab now that's more pristine. It may be across the street. That's what we're discussing, all of those things. We'll eventually get there.
Okay.
Because it's a great point. You are exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes, we are at the end. Thank you so much for taking your time to be with us. And thank you all for attending. It was great to have you all here. I know we at Start GMB appreciate getting to know more people in the community and hosting events like this. Please always feel free to message us on Instagram or Facebook and let us know if you have any recommendations of future